Here's another 8 minutes of DevOps joy. This time we're creating an easy Azure DevOps release pipeline. I'm Mark W. Schumann from Blue Heron, and let's get started. In a prior video, we took some existing Angular code and created an Azure DevOps pipeline that would check out that code, build it, make an artifact of it that could later be deployed. This time, we're feeding that artifact to an Azure DevOps release. But before we go on, in the industry, we usually make the distinction between build pipelines and release pipelines. They do what you think they do. The former does your building, the latter does your deployment or releasing. It's a pretty clear distinction. And there's not exactly an ironclad technical reason why these two functions can't be combined. In theory, you can create a job stream that pulls your source, builds it, fixes up config files or whatever else needs to happen, and then pushes the output to where it can actually be used. But experience has shown almost universally that it pays to separate the two functions of building and releasing. About nomenclature, though, Microsoft made a couple of bad choices. You need to know that when Microsoft says pipeline, you should be thinking build pipeline. When Microsoft says release, you should be thinking release pipeline. If you're aware of that distinction, the menus become much less confusing. Now, to make a useful release pipeline here, we need to perform 4 smaller projects. First, set up the storage area where our front-end app will be deployed. Second, we have to fix up a couple of small issues in the build pipeline. Third, we create the release pipeline itself with its task list. And finally, we'll set up the continuous deployment capability. Here we go, creating the storage area. That happens in the regular Azure portal, not in DevOps, and we create a new storage account. We'll make this in a new resource group and we'll give it the name Blue Heron Storage. We're going to need that later. All the other defaults are okay to start with. Now, since the goal here is to deploy a front-end app, let's also go enable static website hosting on this storage account. Behind the scenes, that creates a storage blob that's called $web. We need to make that blob world readable so it functions as a public website. That's the first of the 4 things we needed to do. Now we go back into Azure DevOps and fix 2 problems in the azure-pipelines.yaml file. We can edit in place in the DevOps console. Add a task to publish the build artifacts. Remove the task that creates the zip file because we just don't need it anymore. And commit the change. Annotate that commit. And because we changed a file, the continuous integration feature will restart the build pipeline for us, which is really convenient because we're going to need that published artifact in a minute. Okay, that's done. Now we create the release pipeline. This one will be rather simple. We start with an empty job with a single stage. Release pipelines can have multiple stages, but we're literally doing one thing in this deployment, so never mind that now. Let's add one artifact to start the pipeline, then pick the artifact we just had published. And we can fix the source alias here so it's less annoying to type later. Confirm. Okay, good. Now we go to the list of tasks and add just one. You have a zillion options of task types here, just like in build pipelines. We happen to know that the one task we want is an Azure CLI step, so pick that. You can also create custom steps, but that's not for now. We set that up and we're going to need a resource manager connection, and there isn't one already. It gives us access to the Azure environment in which the command executes. So it's going to want credentials here. Now the script itself is going to be PowerShell, and we want to inline it. We could save it as a separate file, but that is just more work right now. And here's the script itself. Hang on a second here, and notice those values in $sign parentheses. Those are script variables, so let's set those variables. Storage account name is Blue Heron Storage, which we set up in the first step. And let's bop back to the Azure portal to get the corresponding access key. This is not the most secure thing because anyone who has access to see your release pipeline setup also gets to see the key. Just be aware that in a real environment, you'll want to use the Azure Key Vault instead or something like that. Okay, we'll save that. And then create release is how you run this release pipeline manually. It takes 6 minutes, so here's fast motion. Boom. Okay, now bop over to Azure portal again, and hey, look in the $sign web and the files are right there where they belong. And check this out, the URL that maps to that storage shows the actual app. It totally works. Time for the last thing though. Go back to DevOps, go back to the release pipeline, go to the artifact, and if you click on the lightning bolt, you can set continuous deployment. Save the change. That triggers the release automatically every time the build pipeline cranks out a fresh artifact. Let's make a trivial change in the top level page of the application. Hello world and fast forward. Skip ahead to the release. It builds and deploys automatically. And there's our change. And here, really quickly, is how you snag the resulting log files. And that's it. An easy Azure DevOps release pipeline. As usual, I'm showing you the idealized, fast, happy path. In a more formalized use case, you will probably want to deploy automatically to a testing server and then set up some gates and approvals on the release pipeline that actually goes to production. Azure DevOps gives you capabilities like that too, but this again has been just 8 minutes, no more, to DevOps joy. I'm Mark W. Schumann with Blue Heron. We make easy things easy so the hard things are possible. Bye now.